So whatever expectations you would have for a 1940s hard-boiled detective novel, I bet this ain't it. Let's kick in the door and talk about it.
You needn't bother to come to the door. I'll let myself in.
So Jonathan Latimer wrote Solomon's Vineyard in 1941, and it was never released in the US, only in England, until 1950, where it was finally released in an edited form called The Fifth Grave. It wasn't available in the US in its unedited form until 1988. And boy oh boy, this one's different. There's a reason it gets the attention it does. So our main character in this is a PI by the name of Carl Craven. He is an out-of-shape, bourbon-soaked, sex-obsessed slob. He arrives in town, and the first thing he does is ogle a hot blonde getting into a limousine, who we actually find out is named Princess and is the head of Solomon's Vineyard, which is a religious cult. So Carl goes and gets his hotel room, gets settled, and then goes to find his partner, who arrived in town ahead of him. Only his partner is dead. He was shot through a bathroom window with a high-power rifle while he was standing at the toilet peeing. And of course, the police arrive and think of him as a suspect and harass him throughout the book. But he was technically on the train from St. Louis at the time the murder happened, and they can't really pin anything on him. So Carol goes back to the hotel and immediately picks up a woman at the hotel bar by the name of Ginger. And she happens to be the girlfriend of the local gangster that's pretty much running this town, Pug Banta. And she suggests they go to eat at Tony's, which immediately is a bad idea because apparently Ginger's doing this to make Pug jealous and figures they'll run into him there. And sure enough, Pug shows up while Carl and Ginger are playing craps and proceeds to beat the crap out of Carl for making time with his girl. So the next day, Carl goes to Solomon's Vineyard to meet up with Penelope Grayson. And this is the reason that him and his partner were in town in the first place. He's here to break away Penelope, who happens to be a senator's daughter, away from the cult that is Solomon's Vineyard. So he gets a chance to talk to Penelope, and she seems almost drugged or brainwashed or completely not focused on the situation, not all there. So as he's talking to her, the blonde he saw get into the limousine, Princess, who's basically running Solomon's Vineyard, comes in and breaks up the conversation and sends him on his way. And then Carol gets a message from Carmel Todd, who is Pug Banta's ex-girlfriend, who is now hooked up with the corrupt police chief and wants Carl to take down Pug because she's bitter, and informs Carl that the vineyard is actually running all kinds of crime out of the compound and Pug is involved. In fact, he takes half of the profits, and the chief of police and the DA are both involved in this scam. She also informs him that Gus Papa's place is the only one who hasn't sold out to Pug yet and stays independent. So Carl goes back and finds Ginger and purposely asks her out to Gus Papa's and makes sure that Pug is tipped off to the fact that he's taken Ginger out again and where he'll be. Sure enough, Banta shows up, surrounds the restaurant. It turns into this huge gunfight and battle, which was pretty impressive for a 1940s book, I gotta say. And Carol and Ginger actually escape out the back, while a lot of other people are killed, and escape to the road, only to have a car stop to pick them up, and it be Pug. And I'm not going to give you a lot of details. This is pretty much just the beginning of the book. This book was breakneck. Every single scene moved the action forward. There was no wasted time. Every scene was just full. Every scene had action or something interesting happened. It was just completely breakneck. And that's not the kind of thing you expect from a hard-boiled detective novel in the 40s to start with. Now, the plot revolves around not only finding out who killed Carol's partner, but the main story of trying to get Penelope out of the compound, which is severely complicated by all the things going on with the crooked police chief, the crooked DA, Pug Banta's criminal outfit, and Carol's need to constantly be drunk and constantly be hitting on a woman. And honestly, I was very, very worried about the livers of the people in this book because I don't remember a single chapter where Carl wasn't drinking. I was concerned. I was genuinely concerned for the character's life. And that's not to speak of everybody else's. So we do have this gangster story, this detective story, and this whole religious cult story all going on together, intermingled, which keeps the action at a frenetic pace, to be sure. Part of the story actually revolves around the fact that the former head of Solomon's Vineyard, the leader of the religion and the leader of the cult, has been dead for a long time and is laid up in state on the compound. And once a year, they pick a girl who marries him and is left in the crypt overnight. And when they come back in the morning, she's dead. So this deceased cult leader is being married off to these attractive young ladies who is then spending the night with these women in his crypt, and in the morning they're dead. So how are young women being locked in this tomb and found dead when the only person in the tomb is a dead cult leader? And in fact, Penelope, the senator's daughter that Carl is there to rescue, is next up to be a bride. But then you have the relationship that develops between Princess and Carol, and I was not ready for this because this relationship, well, for a 1940s book, it was supposed to be kind of a mainstream PI book. Now, they never get really graphic, just to let you know the style of the old books. They didn't show a lot of graphic detail, and they don't have to. And honestly, I think if they had shown too much graphic detail, this would have been banned in England and probably never saw the light of day here either, because the relationship between Carol and Princess is a bit problematic. As you find out, she really enjoys being abused. And I'm not talking about a light butt spanking or a little bit of, bondage. This girl wants her shit knocked the hell out. She wants to be abused. She wants to be hurt, punched, beaten up. So, and you can see how in a 1940s book, why this would have been banned. There is a lot of drinking. There is a little bit of racist kind of banter. There's the sexual aspect. There's the religious cult aspect. So you can see why when this book came out as The Fifth Grave, it was heavily edited. Not that I agree with it, but you can see what they were trying for. If you're going to read this book, I'm going to suggest you, whatever you do, make sure you pick up Solomon's Vineyard. Do not pick up Fifth Grave because you're going to get the edited version. And boy, you should read this in all its glory. Because this book was fun. It was over the top. It was, for me, a bit shocking because I'm kind of learning this stuff. I'm going along and learning all of this along with everyone. I don't have a lot of background experience on it. So I wasn't ready for that. And I was just wide-eyed and turning the page after page after page and having a good time with it. Now, the actual mystery involved, I did figure out pretty early. And you probably will too, because it's kind of an obvious thing that happens. It might not have been obvious in the 40s, but we've seen a lot now. But yeah, we knew pretty early on what was happening. There was one scene where we meet a character who isn't in the rest of the book, and you'll kind of get what's going on with that scene because it's kind of like Hardy Boys obvious. But it doesn't really take away from my enjoyment of the book because the book itself is so well written, so fun, and so over the top that it's hard not to just enjoy the ride. And there is some objectification of women in a way that I didn't expect for a 1941 book. Like the opening line of the book. Let me read it to you. From the way her buttocks looked under the black silk dress, I knew she'd be good in bed. That's your opening line. And that sets the tone for the whole book. It was fun. It was over the top and crazy and action-packed and worth the ride. You can pick this up on Kindle for like 99 cents or something. Do it. If you like this kind of book, if you're into hard-boiled detectives and you can't find it in paper, Pick up the Kindle book and read it. It's just a blast. Now, the only drawback I'm going to put on this book, other than the fact, like I said, that you can figure out what the mystery of the cult of the Solomon's Vineyard is pretty easily, and I didn't give you a lot of details about the character involved in that, so you can discover it on your own. The only other drawback is that it's all from Carl's point of view. You only see what he sees. And there's a scene that you really would like to have been there for, but he was in the hotel room sleeping it off and finds out about it the next morning. And I would have liked to have seen that one scene, even if they had to do it as an aside or a newspaper article or something. You kind of just heard about it secondhand, and I really would have liked to have seen that played out. So those are my negatives. That's what keeps it from being, a 5-star read. But I gotta say, definitely fun. Definitely worth reading. If you're into hard-boiled detectives, and if you don't mind a little bit of questionable content, check it out. I'm going to give this 4.5 stars, right between Whiskey Neat and Fine Bourbon. This book was just plain fun. So anyway, thank you for joining me on Ink and Ammo Hard-Boiled Bookshelf. Please subscribe. Hope you come back. Hope to see you soon. And thank you for being here.
No, that'll be all. Just be sure to lock the door behind you on your way out.